What if the plainest doll in your attic, the one with the scuffed shoe and the hair you gave up brushing in 1970-something, is worth more than every piece of furniture in the room she is sitting in? 10 of these overlooked dolls have sold for hundreds, several for thousands, and one of them is the single most produced doll in the history of the world. Let's find out whether she is in your house right now. Here's the truth almost nobody tells you. That certificate taped to the box, the words limited edition on the stand, the numbered plate on the base, those add almost nothing. They were printed by the tens of millions on dolls made specifically to be collected. And dolls made to be collected are the ones that almost never appreciate. Value does not live in the certificate. It lives in the mold mark on the back of the neck, in whether the clothes are the ones she came in, and in how few of her were ever made. And nobody ever taught you to look for that. Why would they? The certificate was the part designed to be looked at. Now, let me be honest with you, the way somebody who buys whole houses has to be. Your doll is almost certainly not the German character doll that Bonham sold in London in 2014 for just over £240,000, close to $400,000. That was a Kammer and Reinhardt, and perhaps a handful of that mold are known anywhere on Earth. I am not going to stand here and suggest otherwise. But the distance between a $15 doll and a $1,500 doll is much shorter than people think, and it is almost always decided by 3 things you can check tonight without leaving the house. Number 10. Composition dolls from the 1930s. If you have a doll with a hard body that is not quite plastic and not quite porcelain, with dimples and a mass of curls, your first thought is probably that she is cracked, crazed, and past saving. That instinct is fair, because composition does craze. It is sawdust and glue, and 80 years of attic heat webs a painted face with fine lines. Here is what that instinct misses. Ideal and the other American houses made these by the hundreds of thousands in the 1930s, and made them well, in the last years before plastic took over. Mint examples still in their original clothing sell in the range of $300 to $1,500. Here is your test tonight. The clothing decides this one almost entirely. Original dresses have small, slightly uneven stitching and a fabric tag sewn into a seam rather than printed on. A replacement outfit, however pretty, drops her toward the bottom of that range. And the loss I see most often. The crazing frightens people, so the doll goes in the donation box, while the homemade dress somebody sewed for her in 1980 is kept in a drawer for the memory. That is precisely backwards. Number 9. Chatty Cathy. Pull her string and she talks, or she used to. Now the string hangs limp, and she has been silent since the Ford administration, so your first thought is that a talking doll that will not talk is worth nothing. Reasonable and wrong. Mattel put her out in 1960, and she sold enormously, which means a great many were made and a great many were wrecked. Complete examples in original clothing run about $300 to $1,500. A working one in her own clothes sits lower, around $200 to $500, which tells you something interesting. Here is your test tonight. Look at her more than listen to her. Original clothing, the correct shoes, and no ink or marker anywhere on the vinyl matter far more than whether the pull string still works. Collectors restore voice boxes. They cannot restore a face somebody drew on. The loss I see most often is the silent doll being thrown out on the assumption that broken means worthless, when the mechanism was never where the money was. Number 8. The soft sculpture dolls that came before Cabbage Patch Kids. If you have a cloth doll with a hand-stitched face, a signature across the backside in ballpoint, and a body that feels stuffed rather than molded, do not put her in the yard sale pile. That signature is the entire point. Xavier Roberts was hand-making and signing these in Georgia in the late 1970s, before the mass-produced Cabbage Patch Kids made him famous. The earliest hand-signed ones from about 1977 and 1978 commonly bring $600 and up, with most landing somewhere between $900 and $2,000, and they can go much further than that. A red-haired boy from 1979 sold at auction in 2024 for $9,500, and a red-haired girl in a party dress from the same year brought $7,000. Here is your test tonight. Turn her over and look at the lower back for a signature written directly on the fabric. Then look at the face. Hand-stitched features with visible thread are the early ones. A molded plastic face means you have a later, mass-produced Cabbage Patch Kid, which is a lovely thing to own and worth about $20. Number 7. The big-eyed doll with the pull string on the back of her head. 4 colored eyes, an oversized head, and a cord you pull to make the eyes change color. Plenty of people find her unsettling. That is not a modern reaction either. She failed commercially and was pulled almost immediately, which is exactly why she is worth what she is. Kenner sold her in the United States for a single year, 1972, and then stopped. 1 year of American production, and a doll children mostly did not like, which means very few survived in good condition. Auction results in 2021 ran roughly $1,700 to $2,500, with asking prices in the shops nearer $3,000 to $5,000, and one with a fully working eye mechanism cleared $4,500. Here is your test tonight. Pull the string at the back of her head. If the eyes change color and the mechanism holds, you are at the top of that range rather than the bottom. Then check the back of the neck for the Kenner name and the year. The loss I see most often with this one is simple. She is odd-looking, so she is the first thing out of the box at a house clearance. The pretty doll beside her goes for $8. She was the one worth a used car. Number 6. The German doll that came before Barbie and got sued into history. A slim adult figure with a knowing expression, sold originally as a novelty for grown men rather than a child's toy, made in Germany in the 50s. If you have one, you probably think she is an odd, early Barbie knockoff. She is the opposite, because she came first. Ruth Handler saw one on a trip to Europe and brought the idea home, and the German makers took Mattel to court over it. Mattel settled by buying the rights outright in 1963 for $21,600, then stopped making her. Examples have sold at auction around $5,000. Here is your test tonight. She is noticeably harder and heavier than a Barbie of the same period. Her legs do not bend, and her painted eyes glance to the side. There is no Mattel mark anywhere on her body because Mattel did not make her. Before we get to the top 5, there is something worth stopping on because it explains this entire list. The dolls that turn out to be worth real money almost never look valuable. They look old-fashioned or strange or broken. They end up in the 50-cent bin at the church sale because somebody decided they had gone out of style. Meanwhile, the doll in the glass case, bought new as an investment, is worth roughly what it cost. What actually decides value is a short list of signals: the mold mark on the neck, whether the clothes are original, how narrow the production window was, whether anything is written on her face. Those are all learnable, and that is why I put together a small guide called Reading the Marks, where I go through the maker marks and the small tells that separate a $20 doll from a $2,000 one, so you can read a piece before somebody across the table reads it for you. It is linked below if you want it, and that is the last you will hear of it. Now, back to the list. Number 5. The American fashion doll that arrived 4 years before Barbie. A 20-inch doll with an adult figure, jointed knees, high-heeled feet, and a wardrobe of tailored clothes. If you have her, you may think she is simply a large, old doll. Madame Alexander brought her out in 1955, and she is generally considered the first American fashion doll, which makes her the direct ancestor of everything that followed. Well-preserved examples routinely clear $5,000, and one from 1955 sold through Terrio's, the specialist doll auction house, for $17,500. The very best Madame Alexander dolls have reached the mid-$40,000s. Here's your test tonight. Look at her knees. Genuine, jointed knees that click into position rather than straight legs are the mark of the better examples. Then look for the maker's mark on the back of the neck or the lower back, and check her clothing for a sewn-in label rather than a printed one. Number 4. And this one is not a doll at all. It is the back of the neck. Lift the hair at the nape and look. On a German or French doll of any age, you will usually find a short line of letters and numbers pressed into the material. That is neither decoration nor a serial number. It tells you the maker and very often the mold and the size. This is where the whole market actually lives. Two dolls can look identical to you and be separated by a factor of 100 because one mold ran into the millions and the neighboring one was made for 2 years. The mark is a signed confession about exactly what you are holding, and the great majority of people flip a doll over, see a jumble, and put her straight back down. Here is your test tonight. Photograph the mark rather than trying to read it in bad light. Then type the letters exactly as they appear into a search and see what the specialist auction houses have sold with the same string. You will have an answer inside 10 minutes, and it will be based on completed sales rather than on hope. Number 3. French bisque. A pale, matte, slightly powdery porcelain face, glass eyes that were set rather than painted, and often a slightly heavy expression that modern eyes read as sad. Your first thought is that she is fragile and old, and probably a reproduction, because reproductions of these are everywhere. Some are, but the originals came out of Paris in the 1870s and 1880s, from houses like Bru and Jumeau, and they were expensive toys when they were new, made for wealthy families in small numbers. A good Bru commonly sits between $5,000 and $15,000, and a small early one in entirely original presentation sold for $28,000, which was double what the house expected. Jumeau starts around $1,500 and runs to $50,000 and beyond, and a large early example with the distinctive wraparound eyes brought $53,000. Here is your test tonight. Real bisque is cold to the touch and stays cold, with a fine, matte surface and a very slight texture, never a shine. Hold her up to a window and look for tiny, dark specks in the material itself, which are impurities from period firing and are a good sign rather than a fault. A glossy, perfectly clean, lightweight face is a modern reproduction. Number 2. The clothes and the box. This is the one that quietly costs people more money than every forgery combined, and it has nothing to do with the doll herself. A doll in her original clothing is worth a large multiple of the identical doll in a homemade dress. A doll with her original box, even a battered one, can be worth several times the same doll without it. Collectors are buying more than the object. They are buying evidence that it survived untouched, and clothing and packaging are the evidence. Here is your test tonight. Look inside the collar and along the hems. Original clothing from these makers usually has a woven label sewn into a seam, small, irregular stitches, and fabric that has aged to the same degree as the doll. A dress that is brighter and cleaner than the doll wearing it was made later by somebody who loved her. The loss I see most often is somebody keeping the doll and throwing out the tatty cardboard box she came in. That box was frequently worth more than everything else in the room. Number 1. And it is almost certainly a doll you owned, or your sister owned, or one you can picture on a shelf right now. Barbie. Over 1 billion of them have been sold. She is the most produced doll in the history of the world, and that is exactly why the overwhelming majority are worth between $5 and $20. I am not going to inflate that for you. Fame is not value. The thing everybody recognizes is almost never the valuable thing, because the whole world already has one. But here is the turn this entire video has been walking toward, and it is the same lesson as every item tonight. The very first Barbies, from 1959, are a different object entirely. Mint examples have reached the high 20,000s. A number 1 brunette sold through Morphe auctions in December of 2017 for $5,000, and a number 1 blonde ponytail brought $3,800 through another house in 2020. So here is your final test, and it is the smallest detail on this whole list. Turn her over and look at the bottoms of her feet. The first Barbies have small holes in the soles, made to sit on a metal stand with prongs, and copper-colored tubes set inside the legs behind those holes. Her right foot should be marked Japan, and the mark on her lower back reads Barbie, then the letters TM, then Pat's Penned, and a copyright date in Roman numerals rather than ordinary figures. Holes in the feet. That is it. That is the difference between a doll worth $12 and a doll worth thousands, and it takes 4 seconds to check. Every single item tonight came down to the same habit. Not the face, not the dress, not the certificate. The mark, the clothes, and the number of them that were ever made. So before you clear out a single box, or let anybody talk you into a lot price for the whole attic, do this first. Turn her over, read the bottom, and believe what it tells you. If this made you want to walk straight up to the attic and start turning dolls upside down, do me one small favor and like the video, because that is what tells me to keep making them. And the next one lives behind the subscribe button, which is exactly this for the teddy bears sitting in those same boxes. Then tell me down in the comments, what is the oldest doll in your house, and who did she belong to first? Your mother? A grandmother? A house you helped clear out? I read all of them, and the story of who owned her is half of what she is. One last thing, and I do mean it. Do not sell a single doll before you have looked at the bottoms of her feet. Number 1 is probably in your attic right now. Go and turn her over.